everybody. Thank you for coming. The first question, does anybody understand what is the circular economy? Have you been following this in the press or whatever? It's something you're going to hear an awful lot about in the coming months, because the EU have done a major research project on this, and they found out two major factors. Number one, it will create by 2020 within the European community 174,000 direct net new jobs. The second element to it is a €1 trillion business opportunity for European industry. And it has a profound effect on the balance of payments within the EU and outside of the EU. So it's a major policy that's really going to drive into all industries, be it tires, be it industrials. What we're particularly focused on is the IT industry, both the IT manufacturers and the major data centers, where it is highly, highly applicable. We're all very familiar with Moore's Law. Everyone understands the concept of Moore's Law. Performance doubles every 2 years, price halves. So the net effect is, in high technology products, you can replace everything you've bought for a quarter of the price inside 2 years. That's basically what they're saying. One of the reasons you might want to do that, of course, is, gentlemen from ESP, is you will get far more throughput, far greater footprint in your facilities, and use a lot less electricity to achieve the same objectives. But here's the problem. In big IT systems, not all the components are obsolete after 2 years or 3 years. The very high-tech components, maybe the processor, maybe some of the storage elements, maybe. But what about the other level of components? They just don't outdate so quickly. In fact, some of the key components are designed to last 8 years, and they don't change. There's no point to change them. So, it's very interesting. What has happened in the past is so many companies have taken 2-3-year-old technology and dumped it. And they have literally been thrown away, depending on the size of your company, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So, to understand what is the circular economy, it's best to go back and look and say, what is the linear economy? And this is what I grew up on, where basically there seemed to be a non-ending supply of raw materials. The fact that we mined the hell out of the earth and ripped it apart was irrelevant. That made parts. The parts went into manufacturing. It was then distributed. It was then given to the user. And then what did we do? We put it back in the ground again as rubbish. And there's a few problems with putting high technology. Simply this. It's not about recycling. Everyone thinks it's about recycling. In the circular economy, recycling is good, but it's the very last resort. It's the last thing you do. If you can't do anything else, you have to recycle it back into raw material. But you stop going back and mining rare earth metals, rare earth minerals. So basically what we're saying is, after the user has gone through it, it goes back to a circular economy operator. These are people that basically the first thing they do is they demanufacture that product. And they demanufacture it in the same type of environments, in the same disciplines that they built it. So they can take it apart and they can recover the optimum component level for reuse, either in spares inventory or in a brand new system. And you're allowed to do that as long as you class it as newly manufactured. And these parts must become absolutely identical in form and function to brand new parts. And that is really reuse being the highest priority within the circular economy. And what I say is, with some of our clients, they are reducing their procurement costs by 20% of all new materials because they have a circular economy philosophy and disciplines built into their business. So for if you think of some of the really big data center companies, the really big IT manufacturers, that adds up to a very, very big sum of money. It's not just the IT industry. There's many, many examples. You should look on the Dame Ellen MacArthur Foundation websites. You'll see how this has been used virtually in every industry. And even the way people buy things or consume things, the financial models are changing to one of use rather than own. So it's basically the future. It is 174,000 direct new jobs. The company that I'm representing here today, our company, we set up in 2007, which, as I remember, wasn't a particularly good time in Ireland. And just in Ireland alone now, we have over 200 employees. So that is part of that, contributing to that 174,000. We've opened up in Asia, we've opened up in the USA. Europe lead the world in terms of initiatives around the circular economy. So we're going to be hearing an awful lot about this. Never incinerate, never landfill. That's the devil's work, okay? So what do? We take parts and immediately you fulfill the supply chain for spare inventory. You know? It takes a bit of design, it takes a bit of thinking about the way I'm going to build this machine. I better be clever at build it in such a way that it's easy to take apart again. So we talk to the design teams to do this. So we satisfy the spare parts inventory. We satisfy the second life because, you know, 3-year-old, you know, rack system in a big data center. We can literally take that, take out the out-of-date components, put in the new components, combine it with everything else, and put it back in at a fraction of the cost of replacing it with new equipment. So you could save 50% of your costs minimum. And that's what a lot of smart data centers are starting to do now. You know, parts harvesting will always go back into the manufacturing process. So sometimes the parts, when we totally disassemble, they go back into the supply chain and they end up in brand new products, enjoying a full life again. Okay? As I say, the last resort, recycling back to and refining back to raw materials. We do it, but at the moment we're basically looking at about a third. A third of materials go back into the supply chain. A third get remarketed, goes back into the whole refining chain. Why would you do it? Well, quite frankly, in 50% of the components, they're totally and utterly indistinguishable from brand new components. That's the technological life cycle development. Okay? They have to be taken apart in the same environments that they're put together. All the Lean Sigma, cell working, quality control disciplines exist. They're not scrap yards, they're not break-in yards. It's actually a full-blown demanufacturing facility. And recovery for reuse is the highest sustainability practice. You're not investing the raw materials to recreate that. You're not mining the earth. You're not using the carbon in the manufacturing process. By far the most sustainable practice. In data carrying devices, though, the big concern has always been data security. But there are many technologies, there are track and trace capabilities, there are secure chains of custody to ensure that all data is eliminated, and in some cases destroyed, depending on the level of sensitivity, the level of threat. So data security is, of course, very, very important. You know, the other thing is, you know, that system as a whole has lost a lot of value. The components haven't. So in the circular economy, the sum of the parts is worth more than came out of it. Usually about 50% more, maybe 60% more. Now the big concern that we have is in Ireland, and I'll give you the figures. I'll tell this first. In Ireland, in terms of waste electronics, we are one of the highest countries in Europe in recording where our e-waste has gone. And we know where about 50% of it has gone. So where's the other 50% going? Well, unfortunately, mainly it's going down the unscrupulous route. There's a lot of criminal activity in this environment. There's an Interpol report, in fact we met with the Garda. There's a very low detection rate, there's a very high organised criminal element. And here's the frightening thing. I've met with many CIOs, and I say to them, so what happens to your big IT equipment the minute it leaves your shop? Where's it go? How's it refined? Where has it gone? Where does it eventually end up? I did it. Some of the biggest data center, biggest IT users in this country, and the CIO could not tell me. He said, well, we just got paid some money for it. Let me tell you where that other 50% ends up. In the burning fields of West Africa from Europe. Through organised crime networks. They melt down, they get children to melt down the PCBs to extract the gold, to extract the lead. They melt cables to extract the copper. Now in the States, they don't have the same regulations we do, but they do have a lot of case action litigation against some big companies. And there's been some pretty big fines handed out. AT&T, you may have heard of them. They just got hit for 52 million for not employing sufficient duty of care to wear their used electronics that they didn't manufacture, by the way, they just used, where it went to. It was further compounded when they found actually there was data on it. So they got a $25 million fine on top of that, and all the ethical funds pulled out of their stock price. So these are the EU requirements. At the moment, 45%, if you're the principal producer, the principal importer of that equipment, 45% of it has to be accounted for, collected and processed all the way through with records. Ireland's doing well, it's at 50%. Where is it going to? By 2019, it's 85%. So this is the year, 2016 is the year you put your strategy in place. And for any company that isn't employing, they're buying large amounts of equipment and they're not employing a circular economy strategy, they are literally throwing money away. But worse than that, they're causing human harm and creating severe pollution. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.